Welcome to Fabian's Zeitgeist. I'm your host, Fabian Kira, mechanical engineer by training, global observer by obsession, and professional overthinker by default. This podcast is my way of decoding current events, economics, politics, and the societal ripple effects that shape our world. I'm not here to pretend objectivity. I've lived, learned, and accumulated biases like anyone else. What you'll hear is my unfiltered perspective, honest, flawed, and open to contradiction. As Socrates once said, I know that I know nothing. You do disagree to my opinions. That's good. It means you're thinking. So, no matter where you are, no matter if you're young or old, a woman or a man, you're white, black, Asian, blue for all it matters. If free speech and unapologetic thinking are your thing, then welcome home. With that out of the way, let's jump straight into today's topic. Right, the topic I want to approach today is called working until we drop, aging, labor, and the future of pensions. You might ask yourself, why this topic? Well, for one, it takes more than 5 minutes to talk about it, and the solutions for it are not really popping out. The reason I come to this subject for today is the ever more present discussion in the German media about the retiring age, how the state should incentivize the already retired people to keep working because of aging demographics, and how the disappearance of the baby boomers from the active society is creating even more strains on the German social state. Actually, I touched this topic in a Facebook chat with one of my friends here in Germany, one former co-worker and mentor. For the sake of the story, let's call him Uwe. Uwe is belonging to the baby boomers generation, and due to Corona and the not so happy developments in this country's economy, he is now enjoying his retirement in the so-called passive phase of this early retirement scheme. And even though I thought I have this episode already laid out, I must admit that he made a couple of fair points that made me rethink a little my position on this topic. But let's start with the beginning. In May of 2025, in one of the talk shows on German media TV station, ARD, the moderator, Karin Mioska, asked who isn't working enough right now. To that, the Secretary General of the CDU, the major coalition party in power in Germany, replied, rather unfortunate, with this now infamous line, the retirees, for example. Of course, you need to imagine this happened in German, and this is my English translation to the exchange. This reply, this line, the retirees, for example, are not working enough, sparked immediate backlash across political, social, and media circles. Linemann, this Secretary General of the CDU, was advocating for the Aktivrente, a policy allowing retirees to earn up to 2,000 euros per month, tax-free, if they choose to keep working beyond retirement age. He emphasized it wasn't about forcing anyone, but about creating incentives for all the citizens to remain economically active. The critics argued that many retirees are physically unable to continue working. The German Trade Union Confederation, DGB, pushed back, calling it the myth of lazy Germans and warning against US-style senior labor, where elderly people work out of necessity. I'm not assuming this is a singular case. I remember last year, my French colleagues at work were up in arms about the plan of the French government to increase the retiring age to 64. I mean, the minimum retiring age. As I'm preparing now for this podcast, I see that it is, in the meantime, a fait accompli, if you would pardon my French. Of course, in France, you also need to work until 67 to be entitled for a full pension. In Britain, the last increase was in 2020, quite a while ago. Back then, the age for retirement was increased from 65 to 66 for everybody. The next increase to 67 is expected also in the next year for those born after 1960. It seems, at least in this part of the world where I am, in Europe, there is only one trend. What is the reason for this change? And more important, can the social systems we have built over the past century still keep up with the current demographics? And will those of us who are now paying into these systems get anything out of them when we are no longer able to go to work? And if the answer is not, what are the possible solutions? Before we get to solutions, let's understand better the problem. For this, I propose we dive into a bit of history. According to worldofstats.com, starting from around 10,000 BC up until around the industrial era, let's say in the early 1800s, the average human life expectancy was around 30 years. But the reasons why people were living only up until that age were different. First, as hunter-gatherers, people were living less due to harsh environment, the lack of medicine, the availability, or rather the lack of food, as back then a constant food supply was not existent, and it depended very much on the ability of the individual, the family, or the tribe to find alternative sources of food whenever game was not sufficient. Not to mention that hunting was dangerous by itself, as it was quite a challenge to bring down big game with just primitive spears, bows, and arrows. Squirrels and rabbits were simply not enough to ensure the survival of bigger family groups, so despite the dangers, the hunters had to take on bigger game like mammoths, bisons, various deer and horse types. But as we developed into settled and more civilized societies, and I say this with a note of sarcasm, food was no longer the main source of concern regarding the life expectancy. The lack of food was replaced by the limited sanitation conditions, the frequent wars, plagues, pandemics. Through medieval times, a sneeze could be fatal, and the doctors prescribed leeches. Only in the last couple centuries, thanks to industrialization, vaccines, and the shocking revelation that maybe washing up from time to time was not such a bad idea, have we started stretching our lives beyond the big 3-0, expanding the average to around 38-44 years. In the early 1900s, it increased up to 50 years due to advances in medicine, antibiotics, and so on. But take this with a grain of salt, as in the early 1900s, we had the first of the world wars, which resulted in the deaths of roughly 17 million people, 1% of the global population at that time. Just as the world had enough of dying in the war, the Spanish flu hit. With that, we had additional 50 million dying. So overall, approximately 4% of the world population died only due to these two causes. A few crises later, including the Big Depression, we had the Second World War, who contributed, of course, not in a positive way to the life expectancy. The consensus regarding how many people died due to the war is that we are talking about a range between 70 to 85 million people. It's quite a big range, right? Well, it's hard to define an exact number. Not everybody died during the fighting. Many died due to indirect effects of the war, like lack of medicine, food, shelter. I'll try to explain this in a different way. I think we can all better relate to. I assume all who are listening now were around during Corona pandemic. So during Corona, at least this is what I heard in my home country in Romania, some of the people who died during that time, even if they were not directly suffering from Corona, they were classified as Corona death. Why? Well, in some cases, people died due to missed surgeries, as the hospitals were only handling the most urgent cases. So yes, their death can be indirectly attributed to Corona. But now, back to the life expectancy boom in the second half of the 20th century until present day. No more big wars, no more hunger on big scale, better medicine, vaccines, antibiotics, sanitation. We started living more and more. Of course, not every region in the world is exactly the same. There is still hunger. There are still regional wars. People are still dying. But still, you cannot compare it with a scale of First or Second World War. As of today, in Japan you can expect to live on average up to 84 years old. In the US, until 78. Germany and UK are both around 81 to 82. Spain and Italy around 84. And the future? Some researchers believe humans could live to be even 130 or even 150. This should be good news, right? But who will take care of us when we're old? Well, this is a valid question and I plan to cover it in detail in one of the future episodes. Now I want to come back to the topic of retirement and pensions. So, if we keep living longer, how can we keep our pension systems from crumbling? The current model is considering that the average Joe is working around 40-45 years, paying in the retirement system, and then is getting a pension for around 3 to 5 years before dying. Take my grandfather, for instance. He only knew how to work his whole life. He never took a holiday and was never away from home, except for work. Together with my grandmother, he built 2 homes. They raised a family, worked hard and dreamt at one point of enjoying retirement together. But shortly before he was due to retire, he got sick, leukemia. Instead of enjoying his retirement, he spent the final years of his life burning through their savings and watching the life leave his body. He faded away just as the system expected. Today, however, the situation is different. Firstly, there are less people paying in the systems of the Western world. Well, I mean mostly Europe, as I'm not really familiar with the social systems of the US, Japan, or China. In Germany in 2025, there are approximately 2.7 active people for each retired. By 2050, there will be around 1.7 active people per retired person. Secondly, the average retiree is now no longer looking at 3 to 5 years of cashing in on their contributions from the times when they were active, but they are looking at maybe 15 to 20 years. Globally, according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, Employment Outlook 2025, the population aging is one of the mega trends reshaping labor markets and social systems. The old age dependency ratio, the number of people aged 65 plus per 100 working age individuals, is projected to reach unprecedented levels in the next 35 years. I already gave you the example of Germany. It seems it's happening worldwide. In other words, fewer people will be working and more people will be depending on them. That's not just a pension problem. It's a productivity problem, a care problem, and a social cohesion problem. The G20 background note on aging and migration in 2025 adds that the share of the working age population is shrinking globally, while life expectancy continues to rise. This means longer retirements, higher healthcare costs, and more pressure on public finances. The immediate solution? Many countries have already raised the retirement age to 67 or beyond. But how far can we go? Can we really expect people to work until 70, 75, or even 80? According to OECD, simply raising the retirement age isn't enough. Without policies that support older workers, like retraining, flexible work, and health accommodations, many will be pushed out of the workforce before they're ready or able to retire. And let's not forget, not all jobs are created equal. Office work might seem easier on the body, but it can also be brutal in its own way on the back, the eyes, and the mind. In Germany, the politicians love to use the example of the Dachdecker. In English, this would be a roofer, the guy who puts the roof tiles on the house. I also find it hard to imagine this to be a job somebody can handle still in their late 70s. But I would say the same is valid for an airplane pilot, a bus driver, or factory worker, where productivity requirements are continuously increasing. So, the older you get, the slower you are. You will not be more productive. On top of that, not everyone ages the same way. Some people stay sharp into their 80s. Others start slowing down in their 50s. We are not machines. We wear out differently. So, what can be done? According to the OECD, a successful strategy must be built around 3 pillars: incentives, employability, and opportunity. That means offering flexible work arrangements, investing in lifelong learning, and redesigning jobs to suit older workers. We need to stop thinking of retirement as a cliff, and there's nothing after that. We need to start thinking of it as a ramp, where people can gradually reduce hours, shift roles, or mentor younger generations. To help us navigate the complexity of aging, I want to bring in a few philosophical voices, thinkers, who remind us that retirement isn't just a policy issue. It's a window into how we value age, wisdom, and community. The German philosopher David Richard Precht has long challenged our assumptions about aging. In his book, Von der Pflicht, he proposes a radical idea: a social year for retirees, not as punishment, but as a way to re-engage all the citizens in meaningful roles. Precht argues that many retirees today are healthier, wealthier, and more capable than any generation before. Instead of sidelining them, society should invite them to coach youth, support schools, and strengthen communities. Precht sees aging not as decline, but as a phase of civic potential. A functional society needs people who think beyond themselves, he writes, even and especially those in retirement. Another voice, Jan Baars, who is considered the premier philosopher of aging, says also something along those lines. He argues that aging should be seen as a time for reflection, meaning-making, and ethical engagement, not just as a biological or economic burden. But this isn't about forcing anyone. It's about rethinking purpose. My own views align with both Precht and Baars. Not that it has any relevance for both of them, whether I agree with them or not. But I do think that meaning doesn't retire when we do. And we need to stop treating aging as a problem to be managed and start treating it as a phase of life to be supported with dignity, purpose, and care. I personally think we should re-engage older generations into raising the next generations, find ways to rebuild the weakening familiar bonds, to bring back to life the tribe where every member is useful and contributing to its survival until the end. I might be wrong. While some of us want and still can contribute to the society, there are some who are definitely looking forward to enjoy the fruits of their labor in the last chapter of their lives. Some of us might not be willing, others not able to pull anymore the societal wagon. And we should, of course, respect that. And there should be no blaming if we choose not to or are simply unable to contribute anymore. There should be also a phase in which the society does not expect anything from us, right? As you can probably tell, I'm wrestling with this myself. But I do believe it's the time to have these serious discussions, to bring in some sharper minds, thinkers, with their philosophical lens on, to craft a solution that's both fair and ethically grounded. We should not shame people into working until they die, but we should look respectfully to engage older generations, give them purpose and honor their contribution. I would also not exclude the possible out-of-the-box ideas AI revolution could bring. We can maybe, with the help of AI, design smarter, fairer retirement systems. Imagine a system that doesn't just look at your birth year, but also considers your medical history, your job type, your physical and cognitive acuity, and even your stress levels. AI could help tailor retirement recommendation to each individual, ensuring that people retire when it makes sense for them. This isn't science fiction. With the right data and ethical safeguards, AI could help governments and employers build systems that are both sustainable and humane. Systems that don't just ask how long can you work, but also how well can you live after you stop. Because in the end, we all deserve a few years before we kick the bucket, and maybe even enjoy them. Of course, we also need to rethink our social safety nets to match the demographics change and the aging of the population. The IMF suggests hybrid pension models that combine public and private savings. In this regard, I don't really have an opinion based on facts. What I can say, and I deeply believe in, is that everyone should save as much as possible for when they are old. Do not spend everything you earn, because you shall not rely on others more than you can rely on yourself. This is common sense, right? While it sounds pretty easy, I am aware that not everyone is in a position to do it. That's why I still hope our social safety nets will be strong enough to catch those who need them most. I'm European after all, and here we still believe in solidarity. This isn't just a policy issue, it's personal. We're all aging. We all have parents, grandparents, or one day will be the ones retiring and needing the care of the society. It's not a question whether we can afford to change. It's whether we can afford not to.
Hi guys, it's Eva, Fabian's better half. At least that's what he calls me. So, did you enjoy the podcast? If you did, go ahead and hit that like button. Even better, rate it and subscribe. That way you'll be notified as soon as new episodes drop and you'll be helping others discover the show. If you'd like to support Fabian's Zeitgeist, you can do so by donating via the PayPal link, which is available on the podcast's website, www.fabianszeitgeist.com. That's FABIANSZEITGEIST. Your contribution helps ensure the continuation of the podcast and keeps the conversation going. Also, don't forget to leave us your feedback. It helps shape the direction and quality of future episodes so feel free to share your thoughts. Until next time, stay critical, ask questions, form your own opinions, and be ready to change them if you hear better arguments. Fabian always listens, eventually, especially when I tell him he's wrong, which is often. Alright, bye guys.